Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's video, I'm going to be answering a lot of the questions that I get asked pretty frequently as a wedding planner. So number one, how do I make a timeline if I don't have a wedding planner? So if you have a wedding planner or wedding coordinator, a large part of their job or responsibilities will likely be creating your day of timeline for your wedding. Even if you don't have a planner or coordinator, I highly recommend having an actual planned out, written out day of timeline that you're able to share with all of your wedding vendors on your wedding day and any important people that might need it on your wedding day. There's a lot of steps that go into making a wedding day timeline, so I highly recommend checking out the video that I recently did. I recently did a more simplified version of a video that I had done previously all about making wedding day timelines, so highly recommend checking that out, and that will give you all of the good information that you need when it comes to start to finish planning a wedding day timeline. It doesn't have to be as tedious or as difficult as you might be anticipating it. Number two, how far in advance should I order a wedding dress? This can really vary depending on where you are and where you're shopping. So if you don't know, I also own a wedding dress store here in Missoula, Montana called Velvet Bride. That is where I am filming this video. Here in my store, our standard production time, we usually estimate 5 to 6 months depending on the designer. That is actually on kind of the shorter end from other stores that I know of. Usually, and that number is the production time, the time that it takes for the dress to come in. That is not including any alterations time. That is not including any shipping delays, accounting for any shipping delays. So you don't want to say, oh, 6 months before my wedding, I can get a wedding dress. Ideally, 9 to 12 months or even longer is the timeline that you want when it goes to shopping and selecting your wedding dress from your wedding date. This way you have time for that shipping time, you have time for your alterations, and for any delays that might come up. Some wedding dress stores may have longer production time, sometimes even up to a year. So just make sure you are asking those questions wherever you are shopping so that you are understanding what their specific time is where you are shopping. Number three, can I DIY my wedding flowers? I get asked this a lot, or I get asked on recommendations on how to do this. And I have done some videos on DIYing in general and DIYing your flowers or saving money on flowers. Short answer is yes. However, I don't necessarily recommend it if you don't have experience working with flowers. So the number one thing that I always say is it's going to take a lot longer than you are probably anticipating or thinking it will. And if you're having a smaller wedding guest count, like if you have less than 100 people, less than 80 people really, it's a lot easier to accomplish this than if you're having a larger wedding and needing a lot more centerpieces and floral arrangements. This can take a couple of days to get everything processed and make sure that everything is clipped and cut to the length that it needs to be and arranged in the vases that they need to be in, not to mention the storage that you need in order to store all of these arrangements. So if this is something that you think you can accomplish the day of the wedding, then definitely switch gears and go a different direction, because I promise you it will take a lot longer. If you want more information on this, like I said, I do have a video all about DIYing and DIYing wedding flowers or saving money on wedding flowers. There are things you can do yourself, but I would not recommend DIYing all of your wedding flowers. Number four, should I have my wedding date or my wedding venue first? So these two go hand in hand, and when it comes to choosing your wedding date or wedding venue, it kind of depends on what's more important to you. So do you have a specific date that you and your partner are really wanting to get married on? Maybe it's an anniversary or a family member's anniversary. Then you would go in and find what venues would have availability on that date. So that might mean that you're gonna have your wedding date first and then your venue will come next. If you have a wedding venue in mind or a particular location in mind, then you're going to be searching for those venues or those types of locations and see what availability they have, and then you would choose your date based on that. So Typically, this kind of just depends on how flexible or how specific you are when it comes to choosing your wedding date. And typically the wedding venue will come first and your date will come second. Number 5, where do I get a wedding officiant? So this is a great question. If you are a couple that is not affiliated with any sort of church, you don't plan to have a religious ceremony, or you have your own religious leader, whether that's a pastor, rabbi, whatever religion you believe in, have that individual officiate your wedding. If that's not the route that you were going, there are a couple different routes you can take here. So what I see most often is the couple will have a family member or a close friend or somebody that has a kind of a role or a part in their relationship, somebody that knows them both the best and can share some personal anecdotes, have them become ordained and perform the wedding ceremony. I see that very often here in Montana. I don't know about other parts of the world. I would love to hear if that is as common in other places. So that's definitely an option. You can just look into what is required for somebody to become ordained to officiate a wedding wherever you plan to get married. Or you can also get some referrals from your wedding planner or your wedding venue or any other wedding vendors. And typically there are professional wedding officiants that will provide that service for a small fee as well. Number 6, what do I do with my decor and gifts at the end of the night? So if you don't have a wedding planner or somebody that is going to help clean up at the end of the night, make sure you have a good plan in place for this for the end of your evening, and make sure you have selected some people that are going to be responsible for taking items off the premise. So it definitely depends on your wedding venue and what their rules are as far as what actually needs to be done. So make sure that you're understanding their contract and know specifically where you're getting married, what they expect of you at the end of the night. So this can vary depending on where you are. But usually you'll want to get all of your personal belongings out, and most venues will require you to have all of your items out the night of your wedding. So not only are you wanting to make sure that your gifts and your cards are getting packed up and secured in a safe place, usually a vehicle that will be driven away by somebody after the wedding, but also any items you brought in that are your own personal items, so picture frames, decorations that you purchased, anything like that, but also your rentals. So make sure you have a plan for what your rentals are going to be packed up, how they're going to get packed up, how they're going to be taken off site by the end of the night, or if there's a plan for them to be picked up by the rental company either that evening or the following day, and make sure that the venue is on board with that. But if you don't have a wedding planner, that is going to be your responsibility to make sure everything leaves, and usually having like a parent or a family member or a member of your wedding party be able to be responsible for taking your gifts and your cards home, and typically in a vehicle. I don't recommend bringing them on a bus if you're taking a shuttle back from your venue, or a shuttle from your venue to an after party to a hotel or something. Put it in a secured location like a vehicle, a family member's car that will be driven away at the end of the night. Number 7, how early before the ceremony should we do our first look? Typically my kind of timeline template for first looks is around 2 hours prior to your wedding ceremony start time. This way you're fresh from hair and makeup and not having to start super early and have a really early first look in comparison to your ceremony start time, but also gives you enough time to do your first look and have some time to take any other photos that you might need, your immediate family, bridal party pictures, any of those that you're able to do before the ceremony, but not also have a huge chunk of time in between your first look and your ceremony where you're going to be needing touch-ups again, or be outside for a long period of time, or just be really anxious waiting for your wedding ceremony. So usually about 2 hours prior to your ceremony start time is good for a first look. What time should hair and makeup start? So this will vary depending on how many individuals will be getting hair and makeup services. So usually this will be kind of constructed between you and your hair and makeup stylist as well. And typically what I do is coordinate with them on what your end time is. So what time you are doing your first look, if you're doing a first look, and then go back about 30 minutes, and that's what time you want your hair and makeup to be done. So for you specifically as the bride, that is when your end time would be, and then you kind of work backwards onto how long it will take depending on how many women or how many individuals need to get their hair and makeup done within that time frame, and that will give you kind of your starting time for hair and makeup. But again, you will communicate with your hair and makeup stylist to come up with this solidified timeline for your day. Do we need to include vendors in our meal counts? Yes. So not every single vendor will have a meal and be required to be included in your head count, but pretty much any vendor that will be there for 6 hours or more will likely have that in their contract, but that's pretty standard that they will need a meal or be provided a meal by you during the wedding. So make sure that you are including your vendor meals in with your overall meal count when giving your final head count to your caterer. Most often this is your wedding planner, your photographer, and your DJ. Sometimes there's staff on site that might require a meal, or if you have a videographer that would require a meal. So make sure that you're checking the contracts with your vendors and knowing who's going to be there during dinner time that would require a vendor meal. And finally, when should we send out invitations? I get asked this pretty much every single day. Wedding invitations, kind of a general rule of thumb, is about 2 months before the wedding date. I always overestimate a little bit, like 8 to 12 weeks is kind of that sweet spot, and then you want to give yourself about 30 to 40 days from your wedding date as your RSVP date. That way it gives you a little bit of buffer time. Most caterers or other vendors that require a final head count will ask for that within like 3 to 4 weeks of your wedding date. So that gives you a couple of weeks to follow up with anybody that hasn't responded so that you can track down any of those remaining RSVPs that you might need. So those are some of the questions I get asked most frequently as a wedding planner. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.